A man's sleep is nothing else than interrupted connections between centres. A man's centres never sleep. Since associations are their life, their movement, they never cease, they never stop. A stoppage of associations means death. The movement of associations never stops for an instant in any centre. They flow on even in the deepest sleep. If a man in a waking state sees, hears, senses his thoughts, in half sleep he also sees, hears, senses his thoughts, and he calls this state sleep. Even when he thinks that he absolutely ceases to see or hear, which he also calls sleep, associations go on. The only difference is in the strength of connections between one centre and another. Memory, attention, observation is nothing more than an observation of one centre by another, or one centre listening to another. Consequently, the centres themselves do not need to stop and sleep. Sleep brings the centres neither harm nor profit, so sleep, as it is called, is not meant to give centres a rest. As I have said already, deep sleep comes when the connections between centres are broken. And indeed, deep sleep, complete rest for the machine, is considered to be that sleep when all links, all connections cease to function. We have several centres, so we have as many connections, 5 connections. What characterizes our waking state is that all these connections are intact, but if one of them is broken or ceases to function, we are neither asleep nor awake. One link is disconnected. We are no longer awake, neither are we asleep. If 2 are broken, we are still less awake, but again we are not asleep. If 1 more is disconnected, we are not awake and still not properly asleep, and so on. Consequently, there are different degrees between our waking state and sleep. Speaking of these degrees, we take an average. There are people who have 2 connections. Others have 7. We have taken 5 as an example. It is not exact. Consequently, we have not 2 states, one of sleep and the other of waking as we think, but several states. Between the most active and intensive state anyone can have and the most passive somnambulistic sleep, there are definite gradations. If one of the links breaks, it is not yet evident on the surface and is unnoticeable to others. There are people whose capacity to move, to walk, to live, stops only when all the connections are broken, and there are other people in whom it is enough to break 2 connections for them to fall asleep. If we take the range between sleep and waking with 7 connections, then there are people who go on living, talking, walking in the 3rd degree of sleep. Deep states of sleep are the same for all, but intermediate degrees are often subjective. There are even prodigies who are most active when 1 or several of their connections are broken. If such a state has become customary for a man by education, if he has acquired all he has in this state, his activity is built upon it, and so he cannot be active unless this state is there. For you personally, the active state is relative. In a certain state you can be active, but there is an objective active state when all the connections are intact, and there is subjective activity in an appropriate state. So there are many degrees of sleep and waking. Active state is a state when the thinking faculty and the senses work at their full capacity and pressure. We must be interested both in the objective, that is the genuine waking state, and in objective sleep. Objective means active or passive in actual fact. It is better not to strive to be, but to understand. Anyway, everyone must understand that the purpose of sleep is achieved only when all the connections between the centres are broken. Only then can the machine produce what sleep is meant to produce. So the word sleep should mean a state when all the links are disconnected. Deep sleep is a state when we have no dreams or sensations. If people have dreams, it means that one of their connections is not broken, since memory, observation, sensation is nothing more than one centre observing another. Thus, when you see and remember what is happening in you, it means that one centre observes another. And if it can observe, it follows that there is something through which to observe. And if there is something through which to observe, the connection is not broken. Consequently, if the machine is in good order, it needs very little time to manufacture that quantity of matter for which sleep is intended. At any rate, much less time than we are accustomed to sleep. What we call sleep, when we sleep for 7 to 10 hours or God knows how long, is not sleep. The greater part of that time is spent not in sleep, but in these transitional states, these unnecessary half-dream states. Some people need many hours to go to sleep, and later many hours to come to themselves. If we could fall asleep at once, and as quickly pass from sleep to waking, we would spend on this transition a third or a quarter of the time we are wasting now. But we don't know how to break these connections by ourselves. With us they are broken and re-established mechanically. We are slaves of this mechanism. When it so pleases, we can pass into another state. When not, we have to lie and wait till it gives us leave to rest. This mechanicalness, this unnecessary slavery and undesirable dependence has several causes. One of the causes is the chronic state of tension we spoke of in the beginning, and which is one of the many causes of the leakage of our reserve energy. So you see how liberation from this chronic tension would serve a double purpose. First, we would save much energy, and second, we would dispense with the useless lying and waiting for sleep. So you see what a simple thing it is, how easy to attain and how necessary. To free oneself from this tenseness is of tremendous value. Later I shall give you several exercises for this purpose. I advise you to pay very serious attention to this and to try as hard as you can to get what each of these exercises is expected to give. It is necessary to learn at all costs not to be tense when tension is not needed. When you sit doing nothing, let the body sleep. When you sleep, sleep in such a way that the whole of you sleeps.